you guys know the Republicans, with their tax bill, just blew a gigantic $1.5 trillion hole in the deficit, right? So it's funny because Republicans during the Obama administration or whenever Democrats are in charge, they're like, oh my God, the deficit. Look at the deficit. Look at the national debt. It's atrocious. It's a moral failure. We got to do something about it. And of course, their solutions are all about, hey, let's cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, right? So that, of course, this budget means that's exactly what they're going to do. Paul Ryan came out later and said, hey, you know what? Maybe next year, 2018 is the day, or is the year that we cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's what I want to do. This is something that Paul Ryan has been dreaming about ever since he was back in his frat days, standing by the keg and going, God, man, I cannot wait to the day I have enough power to go and screw poor people. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, he's the only guy that considered, pictures of women not being able to afford their birth control was pornography to him. He's the only guy.
Yeah.
Him and a couple of his weirdo friends.
Little strange. So
I mean, that's an understatement, but yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know, what kind of person dreams back in college about, messing with people's health care and retirement? I can't. It's hard to wrap your mind around that kind of person. Of course, then again, this is a guy who inspired by Ayn Rand and, all that objectivist bullshit, which I am not objective on. I think it's bullshit. But anyway, so look, we know Republicans, whenever they're in power, they traditionally love to create deficits, and then they make Democrats clean it up with austerity, and Democrats are more than happy to go and do austere policies in order to fix these deficits, which of course leads to Republicans getting in power. You know this cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now a strong progressive party would actually stand up against that. Now, when it comes to the tax cuts, for example, a real progressive party would look at that and go, no, that's a disaster. First of all, you're cutting taxes for corporations and the rich, and also you're making it really hard for us to, as a country, to be able to afford to take care of our citizens, right? Now, the Democrats, in my opinion, have ceded the entire tax discussion to the right by the framing, right? Taxes are bad. Tax cuts in all circumstances are good. I mean, and that's, of course, how an example of how the rhetoric goes that allowed the Bush tax cuts, for example. I think, 92 to 97% of all the Bush tax cuts are now permanent. That's something that George W. Bush couldn't do, and we did that under a Democratic president. And now we have Trump with these tax cuts, cutting taxes for the rich, corporations, and individuals even more, with a sunset provision that's going to have Democrats in 2025, 2027 voting for, gee, are we going to continue these tax cuts for the middle class? Well, we kind of have to now because, well, we don't want to raise taxes on the middle class because taxes are bad, right? So what are we going to do? And that's not even counting what I think the right is going to do, is they're going to say, well, if you want these tax cuts for the middle class, well, then you're going to have to give more tax cuts for the rich so we can have more economic growth because, the tax cuts that we gave them before under Trump, well, they weren't as effective at creating jobs as they could have been. So we have to do it even more so we can close that budget loophole or that budget hole that we blew in the deficit.
Yeah, this didn't work the first time, so we need to throw more money at it. And by it, we mean the richest people that live here.
Basically, because it'll trickle down.
Yeah, which has failed time and time again.
So I would say that that's not the direction that we need to go, right?
No, but I mean, you bring up a really, really good point that what the Democrats do is they kind of have the debate on the Republicans' terms.
Exactly.
And I think they do this literally with every issue. But I think taxes are a great example, especially right now. They'll never take the side of, well, the 1% needs to pay more in taxes because, they get tax loopholes that are absolutely ridiculous. Our corporate taxes are way too low, and that needs to be raised so that we can invest more in infrastructure. We can invest more in education. We can invest more in healthcare. Here's our tax plan. The Democrats never do that. They never take that approach.
I mean, the Progressive Caucus
Granted, in
does.
many ways, I don't think revenue itself is the problem. I think distribution's the problem. And the amount we spend on our military is absolutely insane and needs to change. But that's a different discussion for a different day. Keeping it on topic, they never take that approach of certain sects in this country do need to pay more taxes. And we also need to start having the type of government where people see the benefits of those higher taxes. A lot of countries where they have strong social services and they have a strong social safety net, they do pay higher taxes and they don't mind it because they know what they're getting, because they know that, if they fall and break their arm, they're not going to go bankrupt. It's taken care of. We don't have that notion here in the United States.
No, we don't.
Instead, we kind of entertain this. This method of lower taxes is always good, higher taxes are always bad, and that is, like you said, Jeff, that is total right-wing framing. And when you have two right-wing parties, what dissent are you going to get from that? You're just simply not going to get any. So, it's I think that what this whole tax bill shows us is how kind of far we are from actual progressive change, at least in terms of leadership, and how, we don't really have an option, and how it's time for a revolution because, we have two right-wing parties.
Yeah.
And, when you just go on the notion of, well, one is slightly less brutal than the other, the more brutal is gonna keep getting more and more brutal. And the fact that we don't have a party that says, hey, the rich need to pay more taxes so that we can invest in XYZ, that'll be a better society for everybody. Everybody benefits from a better educated populace. Everybody
Even
benefits from more jobs in society. Everybody benefits from greater infrastructure. Even the rich people that are paying higher taxes, they benefit from that too. That's something people don't love to tell you, but you know what? No matter how rich you are, you benefit from a solid road with no potholes. You benefit when everybody in your community can afford to go to school and can afford to go to a doctor. You benefit from that. It's a better society to live in. So, but we never take that approach here, at least not at the large, federal level.
I mean, it's sort of an unpopular position, when it comes to talking about raising taxes. I mean, unless you're talking about raising taxes for the rich. Now, that's an easy position, actually, and it's a very popular position. What's more difficult is, for example, look,
amidst the people, yes. Amidst leadership,
amidst the
I would
people,
say
for
no.
sure. No, you're absolutely right. Among the leadership, you're like, oh my God, raise taxes. Raise my taxes. How dare you? I must have my second yacht. Or my third house. Or something like that. But yes, among the people, polls consistently show that, yes, people want to, think that the rich and the corporations don't pay nearly enough taxes. And you have idiots on TV that go on and spout, pro-corporate propaganda that say, no, we're the highest tax nation in the world. Look at our corporate tax. Well, first of all, you look at the corporate, the effective tax rate, it's actually below 20%. And now we've made it down to 20%. We've cut it down to 20%, which is enormous, a huge 14% cut. And now they're already looking for more loopholes. So now we're going to have corporate taxes that are even lower than 20%. So congratulations. With these loopholes added in, corporations are going to be paying almost next to nothing. So, but, calling for higher taxes on the rich, that's super easy, right? Now, calling on higher taxes for other people, that's a lot harder, right? So that's what the Democrats find themselves in. Because once 2027 rolls around, they're going to find themselves in the position of, well, do we allow these middle-class tax cuts to expire? Which are actually, look, in this tax plan, I think the average family gets somewhere, and this is around average $50,000 a year, right? And I'm kind of spitballing numbers, but I do believe they get somewhere around $1,000 in savings. So just from the tax cuts, that doesn't take into account all the other things that end up getting cut from them. and the general degradation of public infrastructure that they end up paying for in a way as well, right?
Yeah.
So they
It also doesn't take
yeah,
into account the other kind of loopholes in this whole
right,
thing, the way it fucks over self-employed
right,
people. I mean,
like
there's
me.
no, and I understand where you're coming from, but it's a really tough selling point to actually when you dissect what's going on in this bill, to claim that it will in any way benefit any class of people other
Yeah,
than the
it's
richest among
temporary
us.
at least. There's a temporary benefit here, and it's not that much of a benefit. But when you try to frame it as, "Hey, man, look, no, we want to take that away," suddenly, what little it gives you, people will reflexively think of, "No, no, you can't take that tax cut away. I need that," right? And so, what are Republicans going to do? They're going to be like, "Hey, man, look, we can go forward with this because this middle class tax cut, very, very popular with the people. We can't take that away. But if we're going to get you to sign off, then we're going to have to either cut entitlements or include a tax cut for corporations and the wealthy." So that's what we're going to do because we don't have a conversation. We don't have an honest conversation in this country about what the role of taxation actually is.
Yes.
So, and we've got this, again, right-wing perspective. Now, you bring up something very important, and that's the countries that are higher taxed than we are, right? So let's look at the happiest countries in the world, for example, right? We've got Norway at number 1. We've got Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, and Finland, right? These are the happiest countries in the world, top 5, right? Let's look at some of the highest tax countries in the world. Norway, Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, and Austria, right? So, look, now that doesn't mean having higher taxes makes you a happy country. But it's really, and you hit on this earlier, it's not about income, it's about distribution, right? It's about spending. People in some of these high tax / happy countries, they're not happy because they're getting taxed more. It's because the government's actually using that money to make their lives better. And that's the point that we actually have to make when we talk about taxation. So right now, I think a lot of people in America feel like their money is not going to help them. And they would be absolutely 100% right about that. You talked about the military budget. We spend over $600 billion on dropping bombs on brown people. That is not a priority that's going to help the American people. It's not going to help you and me. No, it's actually going to make it more dangerous for you and me because then we're actually encouraging more terrorism that's going to be aimed against us.
And then that's there's a lot of cyclical effects too. When you bring up how the government's using, the revenue that they bring in versus how we use ours. I mean, in those countries like Norway and Denmark and Switzerland, because they have, these better social services and their revenue is used accordingly. Their revenue is used for universal health care. They're also able to have a much more positive work-life balance than we have here in the United States.
Absolutely.
They also are able to have good unemployment, social safety nets when they need it. They're also able to have a more positive working environment than we have generally here. I mean, and that all bleeds into one another. It's all connected. We have a terrible work-life balance here because a lot of people are tied to their jobs because of the benefits. They'd rather do anything else, but they have to stay at something because of the health insurance or because they have a significant other or a spouse that can't work because of this condition. So they have to stay here because they have to pay those medical bills. So yeah, I mean, it all kind of it's kind of a like a domino effect, I guess would be like the right way to put it, where it's like because we don't have this foundation, it all just kind of topples over, and that's very strongly connected to happiness, and we don't have any leadership that reflects those sentiments, or when we do, we stifle those people.
Right. We push down the Bernie Sanders, which is he's actually to the right of Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, now that guy is a left winger. Okay. And so Bernie Sanders in a normal world would be center left. He's pushing for, let's have some stronger safety net programs in the country. Let's have things like, for example, free college. Now, you mentioned a lot of the programs that they have in these higher tax countries. This is what your money pays for when you actually live in one of these countries. Free college, as I said, universal health care, free child care, right? So that you can go to work. You don't have that in America, as you point out. You actually have to, try to find a babysitter. It can be very stressful. It can lead to people not going to work, staying home because it's far too expensive. You can't pay for childcare on a minimum wage salary. No, there are some places where it's over $2,000 a month just to pay to have somebody watch your children. So that's insanity, right? You also have paid maternity leave in those countries, loads of paid vacation time, as I said, a strong safety net for people who are unemployed. That's why people are happy. In America, we don't have any of that stuff. And guess what? Nobody's happy. Everybody's pissed off. We're all stressed out. Anxiety. I mean, Big Pharma is making out fantastic because everybody's anxious and depressed because of the way our culture is set up. And so, they're pushing meds on everybody and here, take this for anxiety, take this for depression. And, those are real problems, right? Real issues. But I think a lot of it is caused by our society, the way that it's set up and the mentality. And again, it's all this individualist bullshit. And we don't have any sort of collective view of what it means to take care of Americans and what it means to be, part of America.
Yeah, well, that's because we're all just temporarily embarrassed millionaires, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And so you're right. It's not that we don't have the money. We just misallocate it thanks to Republicans and corporate Democrats. I know you don't call them corporate Democrats anymore. What's your names for those?
That's my New Year's resolution. I'm no longer using the phrase corporate Democrats because, and the reason I'm not using that is because I feel like that makes it sound like it's acceptable for Democrats to be a corporate party, and it's not. The Democratic Party is a corporate party, but that's not acceptable. You can't have two corporate parties. You should have one, and then you should have an alternative to that.
Or maybe we shouldn't have one.
That's a problem. So the Democratic Party has been infiltrated, and they've been, and that's been going on for a long time. This isn't anything new, but that doesn't make it any less acceptable, or excuse me, any less unacceptable. Mm-hmm. So, a corporate Democrat, that should be an oxymoron. That should not exist. So I'm not going to use that phrase anymore. I'm also not going to use the phrase neoliberal because in the contemporary United States sense, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people misassociate that term, and they think that just means a new liberal that's maybe a little more moderate. Well, that's not what it means at all. Neoliberal, applies to the liberal part refers to the market, right? It's actually a very conservative idea. Mm-hmm. But, just to avoid the confusion, I'm not going to use that term anymore. So yeah, I've decided I'm going to call the people that those ideologies applies to, I'm going to call them corporate apologists, because that's what they are. They're seeing this corporatization of the Democratic Party, and they're saying this is acceptable. Or I'm going to call them Starbucks conservatives, because
yeah.
At first I was going to say Starbucks liberals, but I'm like, no, they shouldn't be called. Like, their ideology's not left at all, so we shouldn't call it. We should call them conservatives. They are conservatives.
Yeah, but they're conservatives that are wrapped up in identity politics, I think.
Well, they don't get to claim the left anymore. Like, I'm sorry. They don't. You can't say, hey, I have a gay friend, and I don't go to church on Sundays, so I'm a progressive. No, you're not. You might be, but that doesn't make you a progressive. That just makes you a person that does both of those things, which, right. That's, if you don't subscribe to any religion, that's your choice and good for you. And that's awesome that you're not homophobic. Homophobia is a terrible thing, sure. But just being like, oh, well, that makes me no. If you're okay with everything else, if you're okay with endless war, if you're okay with destruction of the environment, if you're okay with the corporatocracy that's going on in our leadership, if you're just going to turn a blind eye to all that, well, then you're not a progressive person. You're a conservative person if you're okay with all that other stuff.
Yeah, and look, we're not saying that you have to be progressive. Just be honest with us. Just tell us.
Yeah, just be honest about what you are. And people deserve honest designations. They shouldn't be sold this idea
Mm-hmm.
that, these people, just because they have a D next to their name, that they're inherently progressive or are going to do anything for the working class or anything like that, because, that's not guaranteed anymore.
Exactly.
There's nothing progressive, quote unquote, or even liberal about a Joe Manchin or a Claire McCaskill or like any of the people cut from that cloth. So, we should start calling it what it is. They're corporate apologists and Starbucks conservatives. And you know what? The irony of all that is that Howard Schultz, who, is not perfect, but Howard Schultz, I would say, is actually more progressive than the people whose ideology that refers to. I would make the argument that Howard Schultz is actually more progressive than those people.
Yeah. And another thing that makes it so, somebody who's not progressive is when you use and adopt their framing when you make an argument. Unironically. And now if you use it ironically to point out their inconsistencies, well, that's perfect. That's what we do here. But if you're using their arguments and their framing, especially when you refuse to make a case for taxes, well, that does not make you progressive. And that actually makes sure, because it helps to make sure that the right wing wins the tax debate every single time. We'll never win on this.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.